All right, the time has finally come. After much deliberation, it is time for me to give you my top 10 movies of 2022. I think I've been saying this every year since 2019, since I've started this, but this year has been really, really good, which made making this list really, really hard. There were so many amazing movies, and I wish I could include them all, but it's a top 10. I mean, some people may do top 20, but I don't think people are going to watch the top 20, so I had to narrow it down. You will be surprised to see that there's some big movies that I had left off this list, and the reason why is because this list is not just based on quality, but it's based on my personal enjoyment, so that's why these are my favorite movies. If you love them too, and they're on your list, that's good for you, but this is my list. Secondly, I have not seen every single movie this year. I've seen a lot. I saw over 100 movies this year, but that's still not all of them. There's way more than that. Before I get into my top 10, I do want to do honorable mentions. Movies that, while I was making this list, jumped on and off constantly because I couldn't really figure out what to do with them. These are movies that I did love, but I just didn't love them as much as these 10 that are going to be on this list. So, here are my honorable mentions. I'm just going to do it rapid fire because I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So, let's go. Top Gun Maverick, Violent Night, Turning Red, Pinocchio, The Fallout, The Whale, Avatar, The Way of Water, RRR. So I'm sure that a lot of people are probably going to click off after that part because I put some stuff in the honorable mentions. You're going to be like, Chris, how did that not end up in the top 10? You'll see why. All right, the last thing I'll say before we get into the list. I know, I'm taking forever, but I want to say that I wanted to balance this list out. I didn't want to do the prestige movies. I didn't want to do blockbusters. I wanted to do a mix of everything. I wanted to try and show some love to some smaller movies that I think are super overlooked. I wanted it to be a good balance. So that's why a lot of blockbusters got taken off of the list, like Top Gun, for example. But I did really enjoy it. All right, without further ado, my top 10 movies of 2022. Number 10, The Banshees of Inisherin. This one snuck onto my list, but it's one of the best movies of the year for sure. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson are amazing in this movie. The destruction of their friendship is just so heartbreaking to watch. And the thing is, it kind of starts out sort of quirky and funny. You're like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. And then it takes a turn. And you're like, oh, okay, this is serious. And I think their performances are a masterclass. There's also some real standout supporting performances, like Barry Keoghan. He absolutely kills in this movie. At first, the character seems like it could be annoying, but then next thing you know, he's like very endearing, and you also feel really bad for him as you learn more about his personal life. There are so many things at play in this movie that work together so well. If you have not seen this movie yet, it is streaming now on HBO Max. Please go watch it. Number 9, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. You're going to see a lot of horror movies on this list because I think this was an amazing year for horror. I feel like most of the movies I saw in this genre were amazing or pretty good. But this one was one of my favorites. I feel like this movie was made specifically for my generation because I guess technically I'm Gen Z, but I mean, I feel like I'm more millennial, but that's another story. But this movie is like a Gen Z horror movie, but it doesn't feel like it's necessarily making fun of Gen Z. I mean, it is a little bit, but it's more so laughing with us, and I like that about it. It's sort of a whodunit, and it just gets really absurd as these group of girls are trying to figure out who killed one of their friends, and they keep pointing fingers at each other, the way they start jabbing at each other with pulling out personal details and roasting each other, and it just keeps getting more absurd. I love it so much. But there's also a lot of tension as you're watching this, as they're moving around this house with no power. You don't know which one of them you can trust. And I was on the edge of my seat until the very end. Performances are amazing. The performances were amazing. Amanda Stenberg, Maria Bakalova, and also a really surprising performance from Rachel Sennott. This was a really great group of actors. They played off each other so well. This movie is over the top, it's funny, and it's suspenseful. The ending I didn't actually see coming at all. Please go check this one out. I don't think it's streaming anywhere yet, but I'm sure it will be at some point. Besides horror, another genre that did really well this year is animation. There were so many strong animated movies this year, and it was so hard to pick just one because it's really just a great year for animation. I don't know what else to say. But number 8, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. I have been a Shrek fan for most of my life, and so I liked the original Puss in Boots spinoff years ago, and this one was a complete surprise. It was surprisingly more adult than I was expecting. They have cursing jokes, they have blood, the themes are heavy. This is a very introspective movie for Puss in Boots. Like, it's really tearing down his character, and he's really growing by the end of this movie. I didn't expect to see how much he grows in this movie. He starts off really cocky, but as he realizes he's down to his last life, things really start to become real for him, and you see that He's also dealing with PTSD because there's this wolf that's hunting him down, which I thought was one of the best villains of this year, which is crazy for me to say, but this wolf, especially when you figure out what his deal really is, one of the best villains of the year for sure. Also, the animation, DreamWorks has really been killing it this year with The Bad Guys, and now this is a great mix of 2D, 3D, sort of the Spider-Verse style, but they also are kind of making it their own. I think this is one of the best animated movies of the year. It's still in theaters, so please go watch it in theater while you can during the holiday season, or if you get a chance after the new year. But this was one of the best animated movies of the year and a great year of animation. I really hope it gets recognition during award season, but even if it doesn't, it's still one of my favorites of the year. Number 7, The Black Phone. Like I said, this has been a great year for horror. There are multiple horror movies on this list because they're all so great, but this was especially one of my favorites. Ethan Hawke was a terrorizing villain in this movie. His plan, as you see it unravel, gets creepier and creepier. The direction from Scott Derrickson, he absolutely killed it. It was great to see these two together actually again, Scott Derrickson and Ethan Hawke, because they also worked together on Sinister. I love the build-up of this movie because certain elements appear throughout the movie and you're not sure how they really connect, but then in the finale, it all just wraps up together in such a beautiful way. I absolutely loved it. The kids were also great in the movie. I love the brother-sister relationship. This is one of the best horror movies of the year, one of the best movies in general of the year. I also think this is one of the best endings that movies had this year. I'm pretty sure this movie is streaming on Peacock, but if I'm wrong, I'm going to put it in the lower thirds, but definitely check this one out. All right, now number 6, these two movies, because this is actually a tie, these two movies are just outside the top 5. Like, at one point, one of them was in it, and I was like, I don't know. Now, on a technicality, these both came out in this year, but they're both part of the same franchise. So it's kind of hard for me to pick one over the other. So that's why I just put them together and made it a tie, because I feel like they make sense. And based on what I just said, you could probably guess what it is. Number 6, X and Pearl. This is a franchise that I'm really excited for. Ty West is really killing it. Mia Goth especially is killing. Oh my gosh. Like, she played 2 characters in X, and then she played one of them again in Pearl. And in both of them, she's just amazing. Pearl especially, there's a monologue that she does, which had me enthralled. And then the credits, I'm not going to spoil it, but she has to like hold a certain face for the whole credits, or at least the main credits. I was just blown away. These movies are great. Throwback horrors are sort of slashers. And then speaking of Pearl, with X, what I didn't expect going into it is that I was sort of sympathetic for the villains. Like, again, what they're doing is wrong. They're like killing people, but you understand why. You understand their perspective, especially Pearl's. And then the movie Pearl delves into that even more. So you really get an understanding of this character. Mia Goth truly brings this character to life in both X and Pearl. This is just a masterclass of horror. Again, this is a great year for horror. These were both amazing movies. I could not pick one over the other. They're just both so, so good. I'm really excited for the third movie in this trilogy, Maxine, which comes out next year. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how this all wraps up. But both movies are amazing. If you haven't seen them yet, go watch them. Number 5, The Batman. This one, I guess, is kind of obvious because I've had this comic sitting in my background for most of this year, but this is definitely one of the best movies of the year. This is a really fresh take on Batman. Again, this is more of like his early years. You see that he's not quite to the level that we've seen in previous versions. He's still learning. He's still trying to figure out what his place is in Gotham as his hero. Robert Pattinson is amazing in the role. I also loved Andy Serkis as Alfred, who I think he had a great year too with this and Andor. He was amazing. And then the villains, man. Paul Dano as the Riddler, also one of the scariest villains of the year. He's played more as like a serial killer in this one, like the Zodiac Killer, but there's also still a little bit of that sort of goofiness that you see in Jim Carrey, but it's just more sinister. I think he played that so well. I'm so interested in this version of Gotham that Matt Reeves has created. It's darker, it's grittier, it feels more grounded. Now, I'm sure in future movies they might get more into the comic booky stuff, but as of right now, this feels very grounded. It feels real, like a real person put on the bat suit and going out and fighting crime, and people are actually scared of him. They're not sure if he's real. He's sort of a myth, a legend. The action is amazing. The car chase is still one of the best scenes of the year for sure with the Penguin. And speaking of the Penguin, Colin Farrell disappeared in that role. The makeup artist, the hair stylist, everybody involved who made his look, kudos to you. I hope you get the Oscar for makeup, hair makeup, because that was amazing. If you didn't tell me that was Colin Farrell, I probably wouldn't have figured it out, because even his voice is different. And then also Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. I loved how he played off of Batman. This movie is darker and serious, but it also has a lot of comedy, and that comedy came from a lot of the back and forth between Jim Gordon and Batman. Selena Kyle, I'm looking forward to seeing more of her and how this version of Bruce Wayne and her get along. And this is going to be a really strong franchise, and I'm happy that they are keeping it separate from the rest of the DCU. Number 4, Glass Onion. This is the second whodunit on my list. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is sort of a whodunit, but more on the horror side, and this is more on the comedy side. I love Knives Out. At first, I'll be honest, I was like kind of on the fence about it, but after the second watch, I really liked it. But this one was really good on the first watch. I loved it so much. The cast is amazing. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is having the time of his life in this role. You can tell he's really having fun with it. The rest of the cast plays off him so well, especially Janelle Monáe. I love their relationship in this movie, especially as you figure out more of what's going on. The nonlinear storytelling was interesting, how the first act shows some stuff happening, and then the second act goes back in time and gives you way more context and kind of recontextualizes everything. I really like the mystery and how this one wrapped up. This Knives Out franchise, I think, is one of the best modern franchises right now. Rian Johnson is really onto something here. I'm really looking forward to seeing the next one that's going to be on Netflix. But I will say Netflix messed up by only putting this movie in theaters for a week. This movie should have been in at least 2 weeks, maybe even a month. If they had this movie in theaters for a month leading up to it being on Netflix, they would have made so much money. They left so much money on the table because they want to push the streaming wars and be ahead and be like, oh, look, we have the exclusive Knives Out sequel. A lot of these companies are losing money from the streaming wars, so I feel like it would make sense when there's money right there to just leave it in theaters. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. If you haven't watched it already, what are you doing? It's streaming on Netflix now. Please check it out. All right, now number 3 is definitely going to be a surprise for a lot of people because I don't think anyone really talks about this movie. Probably because it was dropped on streaming in like the middle of the year. But honestly, when I thought back about what movies really stood out to me this year, this one really just kept popping back into my head. I'm like, okay, that means this definitely has to be in my top 5. Number 3, The Valet. You're probably thinking about, Chris, what? You put this over the Batman? Yes, again, this is ranked on my enjoyment, and when I think about this movie, it's another one that kind of sneaks up on you. It starts off sort of conventional, and you think, oh, I know where this is going, but no, this has so much more heart than I was expecting. It's hilarious. Eugenio Derbez and Samara Weaving are a great pair. I love their relationship in this movie. It starts off like a rom-com that you'd expect, but it's not that. It's more. And I feel like it's one of the most overlooked movies of the year. And I put it this high on the list because I want people to go watch it. I really enjoyed it. I actually think it's the best comedy of this year. And when I think back, I don't think this was a really big year for comedy, at least that I can think of. But that makes this one, for sure, the best comedy in my opinion. If you haven't watched it yet, it's streaming on Hulu. Please check it out. Number 2 was another big surprise for me. I did not expect this, but this is definitely high up on my list. Number 2, Barbarian. This was one of the best theater experiences I've had this year, for sure. I did not know what to expect going into this movie. I love that the trailers barely showed anything. Like, they pretty much only showed some of the first act, but this movie just goes in a completely unexpected direction, and if you still haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But the second and third act really just go to another level that I was not expecting. This was one of the biggest surprises of the year and my favorite horror movie of the year for sure. Georgina Campbell plays one of the best horror heroines I've seen in a while. Justin Long plays a character you love to hate. Bill Skarsgård plays a role that you think there's more to it, but they really pulled the rug out from under you, and I love that about this movie. This is one of my favorite movies of the year for sure. It's one that I keep thinking about, the one that keeps popping back into my head. When I first saw it, I was going crazy on social media trying to get everybody to go watch it. It makes sense that this is my number 2 movie. It's on HBO Max right now. Please go watch it. I will say seeing it at home is not quite the same experience as seeing it in a theater, especially in a theater full of people, but it's still worth watching. One of the best horror movies of the year, in my opinion. And now, number 1, my favorite movie of 2022 has to be Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And actually, I even have the Blu-ray. This movie is, I can't even begin to explain it. This is one of the craziest movies of the year. It has a little bit of everything. It's got action, it's got heart, it's got drama, it's comedy. The visual effects are amazing. The story is completely bonkers. The cast is amazing. We have Michelle Yeoh in the lead role, amazing. Stephanie Hsu as her daughter. Their relationship is one of the best parts in this movie, and she does a dual role, as do many of the characters in this movie, because it talks about the multiverse. It is a multiverse movie. Then there's the return of Ki Kwan to cinema, and he is also amazing as her husband. I thought this movie was just so well done, so well made. The costumes, the effects, the sets, the mechanics of this world are so interesting. The multiverse jumping, everything about it is so over the top. I love it. This is one of the best movies of the year, and I had to get it on Blu-ray. If you have not seen this movie yet, you can either get it on Blu-ray, or I think in the UK you can stream it on Amazon Prime, but you could also just rent it too. But this for me is the best movie of the year. Please, please watch it. And there you have it. That's my top 10 movies of 2022. Again, there's so many movies that I wanted to mention that I just couldn't because I had to make space. Because if I really want to talk about every single movie I love this year, this video probably would have been like an hour long. And I know people weren't going to watch that. So I really had to cut it down. But this was an amazing year for movies. For me, the winners were horror and animation. Those two genres had a field day this year. There's some strong performances that I'm really rooting for in the Oscars and other awards shows. I'm hoping that 2023 is just as good as this year, but again, that would make it harder for me to do a list. So we'll see. But thank you for watching this year. I know I haven't been as consistent, and I'm not gonna say I'm gonna change that because I think actually it works out better for me to do these more spread out videos where I take my time and do videos about topics that I really want to talk about and maybe move away from movie reviews. So stick around. We'll see what happens in 2023. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.